hasn't this been fun? Well, let's make sure Agna gets another round of applause for her and her team. There we go. Well, what I want to talk with you about today has to do with psychology and research-informed practice. And unlike most of your speakers, I do not have a background in law. My background is as a psychologist. I'm a certified mediator, and I've had lots of different kinds of training. But still, my background is psychology, so I approach things a little bit differently. Let me talk with you about what I want to cover today. And I'm not going to read all the slides as one of the previous speakers did. And weren't they all excellent? Some of them are still here. Can we give them another round of applause? They gave you information that is priceless. But today we're going to talk about three things. I want to talk a little bit about outcome research, because that's what psychologists do. My 5-year doctoral program, half of it was learning about the research in psychology and how to do research, and the other half was all clinical. The second thing, talk a little bit about research in the area of trust and humility, and I'll try to weave in some new things that have come on, and then talk about emotions. And I do a lot of training of advanced mediators, and one of the things, I'm not supposed to get further than here, so I'll try not to get that way. But they always ask me, we've been working, and you know the thing we struggle with is that people come in and they get so angry. And I think, I bet that's going to happen in mediation. As a matter of fact, I call it a gift, and let me talk with you a little bit more about that. There have been several studies, and I'm going to touch on a few things about them. Sometimes when I look at the field of mediation, and even when I look at law journals that focus on mediation, they focus on research, but they don't always focus on the research that looks at what works in mediation. You get lots of surveys and what are people doing, but not exactly on whether it works or not. So the State of Maryland Judiciary a few years ago embarked on a really interesting study where they said, gosh, we've got all these people in mediation, and some of them are keeping everybody together, but a whole lot of them are starting to put them in caucuses all the time, and we want to know, what do the people want? What do the people, the clients who've been a part of that conflict, what do they want? Well, interestingly enough, when I asked my students, and I still teach some classes, and if I went to any of my students, they would say, if I asked them, how is this class going? Do you like this class? You know what they all tell me? You all know what the answer is. What do they tell me? I love this class. As a matter of fact, you're our favorite teacher. Now, that's not what they say when they fill out the evaluations, but that's exactly what they say when I ask them in class because of the demand characteristic. And that's what they think I want to hear. So that's what they tell me. In mediation, attorneys tell me all the time, listen, my clients love it what I'm doing. They love it when I take them in caucus, and they really like it when I kind of give them some good ideas of how to get things going in that conflict. State of Maryland found out, guess what? They really don't like that. They did surveys. This was a very comprehensive study because they knew it was the first one that had been done just like that on day of court mediation. And what they found out is that people, they might have told their attorneys or their mediators they liked it, but they ended up going to court for the same issue within 6 months to a year. They didn't like getting ideas from the mediator. What they really liked was when mediators paid attention to emotions and when they allowed people to stay together. Sometimes we have to listen to what the research tells us. They found out the more time they spent in caucus, there were lots of things that decreased, and you can read what those are, and all those are things that are important to us as mediators. So this kind of research can give us a clue for some things we can do if we want to do better. Some other long-term analysis was also interesting because what they found out was that we can be more effective when we really use the skills that we were all trained with. Just listening, learning how to use your emotions and pay attention to emotions and not be afraid of them. I mean, those are things all of us have anyway, isn't it? We're not afraid of our own emotions, so we need to not be afraid of theirs also. And it's not just mediators. Psychologists have the same problem. Over the years, I've had opportunities to train doctoral students in psychology, and one of the things they struggle with most is how do you deal with clients that come in who start crying? Isn't that interesting? If you're going to be a psychologist, I bet you're going to have clients that come in and cry. So you have to learn how to deal with it. The American Bar Association, they said, this just upset everybody. So the American Bar Association said, let's do this. Let's figure out what's going on across the nation. Maybe things are just weird in Maryland. And that's what's going on, and that's why they got these spurious results. And so what they did is they looked at mediation across the entire country. Guess what? They found the same thing. So Galton, Love, and Weiss, a couple of years ago, said, well, that's what's going on in the States. What's going on internationally? We want to know what's happening in different parts of the world. What do you think they found? They found the same thing. People like to be listened to. They like to be together rather than in caucus. They like to have mediators be able to respond to emotions, even if they're those difficult ones that we don't always like dealing with. Read their study. All of these are saying the same things. And several people, and they said that this slide talks about it, 95% of us as mediators have been trained in joint sessions, but well over half of the people are just keeping people in caucus all the time. Now, the clients don't like it, so guess what's happening? And I can talk about some artifacts of different groups and communities and areas of just the states that I'm aware of where people are saying, we may be mandated for mediation, but we've learned we really don't like mediation. And mediation is a real important tool for us. You've heard from all the wonderful speakers that came before me today and from the great people who will follow me, that how important it is as mediators that we be able to do this to help bring communities together. Giuseppe just mentioned how important it is for all of us to have these skills to help people in all sorts of contexts. And we don't want to kill the one thing that can really allow us, as President Elena Koltsaki said, find peace in this troubled world. A number of people have found that caucuses are valuable in certain contexts. And I would say even more than that, because I have done a lot of mediation, mediated for probably about 15, 20 years. The last 10 years, I do a lot of work training mediators. But they have found that it's really helpful in labor relations, and I would add something else to that. I think it's really helpful when you get in an intractable situation and you need to just figure out what's going on. But it is not helpful when people just get angry and you say, I don't want to deal with angry people. You need to find out some tools so that you can learn to deal with that. People have gone back and re-studied this ABA study that came out because they said, this tells us so many things about mediation, about mediators. And it's interesting because if you read the report, you find out over and over again it says, the attorneys and the mediators say that everybody likes it and it works. But the clients over and over and over again say, that's not what we wanted. That didn't help us come to a resolution of the conflict. We just need to use the tools we've been given. And for how many students do we have in here who are going to participate in the competition? I know we've got a few. You get a chance to practice that over the next few days. You get a chance to practice the real skills. And we require that you get a chance to do a caucus, but you have to have a meaningful conference because we know how important it is that you develop the skills. And to all of the esteemed professionals that are here, don't forget to use the skills that you worked so hard to gain. They even talk about the value of pre-mediation, and that came about in has been a part of a number of new research studies, and that's one way to help get people ready for mediation. And the research is showing that that has real value too. People are more willing to work through conflict if you help them with their emotions, if you listen to them, if you keep them together, and you give them opportunities to learn how to listen to each other. I can't tell you how many people that I've worked in training that have told me after they were trained, they said, you know, this stuff doesn't just work in mediation. They said, do you know when I go home, I'm listening to my kids better now. Isn't that interesting? These skills can not just transform that one session. It can also help transform your life. And I think if you build from the smallest level up, it can make a real difference in communities also. Let me talk with you just a few minutes about trust. How am I doing on time? I'm not looking at the timer. Okay, I've got 8 minutes. I'm good. Trust and humility. If we come across in a way that's not trustworthy, people are going to have a hard time working with us as mediators. And there's a lot of different pieces that go into that, and I'm not going to be able to hit all of them today, but I want you to know, coming in and saying, listen, I've got a 95% success rate, doesn't always do what you want it to do. First of all, in the mediations that I've done, I don't know that I've ever been personally successful, but the people I've worked with have. Because it's not about me. It's about them. This is their mediation. I'm just there to help facilitate it, help bring the skills I have to help them work through their problems, help resolve if there are relationship issues. But that's on them, and that way they own it. It doesn't have to be mine. We need people to provide that emotional support, and that helps build trust. People trust us if they see us as skilled individuals, if they see that we are confident in our skills. We don't say, well, we've reached a place where I don't know what to do next, we're going to go into caucus. That doesn't always build trust. There's been some really interesting research done on how you can, who violates trust in the relationship. And if you want to, I can probably send you some of that. But there's several things that are important to it. And you see some of those on the screen right now. Competence, reliability, sincerity. But there's more than those. Humility, openness to know others, just being open to be a part of that process, which we are so humbled to be able to be with them, that they would trust us when they are the most vulnerable, when they're in conflict. Think about it. It takes a lot of trust to go to somebody when you haven't been able to work it out and say, I need your help. And I never want to forget that. The research has brought up some really interesting pieces about what they find trustworthy or not trustworthy in different aspects for mediators. And certainly some of them are pretty self-evident. If you have a mediator that comes in and says, I care about this process. I want to see that neither side is favored, that they see me as neutral, that I'm not afraid of their conflict, that I know how to deal with it. But they also found that, if all you're interested in is I want you to cooperate, they're thinking, we're in the middle of this major conflict. We can't get along. just help deal with the conflict. The goal is to help develop, in a broader sense, an understanding of who we all are. There's been some, I mentioned the Simon and Gutzel comments, but there's been a lot of research that's looked at how we, by dehumanizing the other person, how we make it much more difficult to work things out with them. And it gives us an excuse to treat them as something less. And that often happens in mediation. And you don't want to have that happen in your mediations. You want to help people start learning to respect each other, and that can happen with something as simple as listening. And not just, and listening at a very deep level, where you're not just looking at their body language, which is most of what they're saying, but also what they haven't said, and reflecting that and seeing if you can find out where they are. And then I always go to the other person. I say, "Did you just hear that?" They say, "Well, yeah, I heard something different." "Well, I'm having problems too." I said, "I know, we're going to get to yours. Did you hear what they said?" And all of a sudden they start saying, "Well, I didn't mean it that way." I said, "Okay, do you want to hear what they really meant?" It's a way of getting them to learn to connect, and then they start doing the work that they really wanted to do. So active listening builds trust. It builds agreement. And just like mediators can learn skills that they can take elsewhere, people who are in mediation can learn those skills too. And sometimes they come back and say, "You're probably not going to like this, but I take those techniques and I use those at home. I use those same techniques at my work, and now I'm doing that too." I said, "Well, good. Isn't that what we want? Don't we want everyone to use these skills if we're going to have a better world?" Accepting our own human fallibility. And I know when I come up here and whenever I work with different groups around the world, I realize I'm from the United States and there's all sorts of stereotypes about the United States and who we are, so I always approach it with a lot of humility and understanding I don't know everything. But I really don't know everything, and in a mediation I certainly don't understand, so I have to listen really carefully. But that humility allows other people to know that I'm learning too, and that they need to help me understand what's going on in the conflict, and maybe in their culture and in their lives. I'm giving you lots of different research studies, and rather than making this seem like one of my psychology classes, where I go into all the studies and how exciting they are, I'm letting you look at that. And if you have questions, I can give you more information later. Cultural humility has been found so much more important than cultural competence in the literature. People who were trained in cultural competence come across in mediation as, "Oh, but I know this because I just took a class on cultural competence, and so I know how to deal with people from different cultures." And the research is really clear that doesn't work, because you can't make assumptions. Just like you can't make assumptions from any one group of people from any country or any culture, because there's a lot of variability in that. What's important is that you are open, that openness to learn and openness to listen, and have them help you understand where they're coming from. And I learn a lot from that too. And they'll be more than glad to tell you, but you just don't want to make assumptions about who they are or what their lives are like. The third group of research has to do with emotions, conflict, and mediation. And we love emotions. When I see somebody who comes in and they're angry, I think they really trust me, because they wouldn't have come to see me if they weren't in pain. And now we just need to find out what it's about so that I can help them learn to work through it. Lots of research on emotions. And as I said earlier, it's one of the more complex things people deal with. And why do you think that is? Whose issue is that? I've got just a few seconds. Why do you think? It's our issue. If we can't deal with anger, that's in us. We need to learn to look at ourselves and say, why is anger such a problem for me? How can I learn to become comfortable with my anger, because then I can work with other people's? We can't take people places we haven't been. And we can't work through conflict if we're stuck in conflict all the time. If we've got so many conflicts in our own lives, we're going to struggle being able to work through conflict, help other people work through it. Same goes for emotions. There's always something vulnerable under the anger. And all I'm going to say about artificial intelligence, because we've got experts coming up after me, is that in psychology we've had artificial intelligence, that we've had computerized programs in counseling for years. You know what? They don't work. And it's because of the human element that each of you bring. However, if you want to do a prescriptive model where divide them into caucus, you tell me this, I'll tell you that, we'll do this, we'll do that, I'll tell you what each other should do, and you move on, that can be replicated. But listening, emotions, building trust, having humility, being open to learn, they'll never replace that. Thank you so much for your time today.